Hey, Jessica Later, broker owner of JL+CoRE, and I'm just going to read a little something I put together for you to help educate you on the market. I would love to talk off the cuff, but I'm not quite there with live video yet. So here we go. Let me know if you have any questions, and I am always here to answer anything real estate related. All right, so here is my very first market insight report, and I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes going through questions like, where's the real estate market going? Where are prices and where are they headed? How are mortgage rates affecting the real estate industry? How affordable are properties today? And just how active the market's been. So let's just jump right in. Why I don't think we're heading for a housing bubble. This slide shows home values going all the way back to World War II. The reason we go back to World War II is that was sort of the beginning of the modern day housing boom here in the States. And ever since then, up until today, there's only been one crash, and that was in 2008. So back in 2008, we saw homes lose value really for two reasons. The first reason was loose lending standards. Remember the no paper loans? People were getting mortgages without proof of qualification, and they were getting homes when they really couldn't afford them. The second reason was a cash out refinance. People took the equity they had, cashed it out, and spent money they didn't have. People were taking advantage and living a finance lifestyle. That's the one time homes lost significant value in this country, and owners were basically caught with their pants down. Now, the other questions that play into the vulnerability of the real estate market is everything coming out of the past 2 years of COVID. There was forbearance, the tool given to those to help weather the storm. Investors speculated that they would see foreclosures come on the market due to owners not being able to bounce back, and they were waiting to get great deals. But they didn't. The forbearance numbers continue to edge downward. As the most recent numbers in April, only 690,000 loans are still in forbearance. Although that sounds like a big number, that is way down from where we were May of 2020. I recently read that 92% of the people that entered forbearance have come out of it. 37% of in the green area were forbearances paid in full. Those are the ones that took forbearance maybe as an insurance policy, and it turned out they really didn't need it. 44% make up the blue shaded area. These people went through some kind of a workout with their bank, either a modification or rate and term refinance or a deferral. 4 of the 5 people either went through a modification or paid it off in full without any issues. It's a very, very positive sign. Now, there are still probably 18% that are still in some sort of trouble, but the bottom line is that this is not going to factor into a housing crash because people have options today. For example, if someone was negatively affected by the pandemic and they had to sell their home, we're not looking at a repeat of 2008. This seller is likely living with a lot of equity in their home, enough to pay off the roughly 6% it will cost to sell the home and walk away with some money in their pocket. This will sufficiently get them to the other side of any financial crisis that they're experiencing from COVID without having to go into foreclosure. Although history can repeat itself, things today are just so different. Here are a few graphics that do a good job of visually communicating how things are different today. So let's go back to 2008. Loose lending standards drive the housing crisis. And let's look at where we are today. Well, the bottom line is lending standards today are nothing like they were in the early 2000s. There are 2 components that this report here shows by the Urban Institute outlined that played a role in the loose standing standard. Hang on, Although history can repeat itself, things today are very, very different. Here are a few graphics that do a good job visually communicating how things are different today. So let's go back to 2008. Loose lending standards drive the housing crisis. And let's look at where we are today. Well, the bottom line is lending standards are nothing like they were in 2008. or in the early 2000s. There are two components that this report shows. First is produce risk in the mortgage business, and second is borrower risk. The red area is the product risk. Think about that as a type of, or think about this as a type of loan that are available to people and that's been virtually eliminated. If you start back out on the left side of 1999, we're talking about all the way to 2021. You see the red portion, it's gone. It's not there. The loans that were available back then are not available today. The brown portion is the borrower risk. It's gotten much, much harder to qualify for a loan after the housing crisis. This graphic tells the story of the difference between today and the early 2000s. And if you need further proof of how this is playing into the market, foreclosures in this country are at an all-time low. Now, the last couple of years, certainly there's been a moratorium in place, and the federal government has stepped in and said, look, we're not going to process these foreclosures during the pandemic. But back during the housing crisis, the areas that are shaded in red, over 9 million people went through foreclosure. We certainly don't want to see that. We don't want to see anybody go through that again. Although it is really, the reality is, it's part of owning property. However, these tighter lending standards have led to less foreclosure in the market. With better qualified buyers, we're seeing less defaults. This is certainly not going to play any role into a housing crash. This slide is a look at the loans that have been given to people with a credit score of less than 620. So again, go back to the housing crisis. There were billions of loans given out to borrowers with a credit score of less than 620. We can clearly say lending standards are different today. That the whole story is different. One of the major contributors back in 2008 is just no longer around. The other issue that we're not facing as much is mortgage debt. A typical household income is much higher today. Wages are higher. Think about the total mortgage payments divided by the total disposable personal income. Folks that are holding mortgages today are much, much better positioned than where they were back in the financial crisis. The housing crisis of 2008. Where we sit today is much lower than where we were in the financial crisis, even lower than where we were in the 1980s and 1990s. Here, this is the cash out refinance numbers. This is a look at the mortgage payments on cash out refinances from Freddie Mac and the difference in the annual payments to cash out refinances. Back in 2006, 2007, and 2008, there was a huge increase in the mortgage payments somebody was jumping up to. And to be able to go through a cash out refinance, they were looking at a major difference in payments. However, with rates as low as they are today, the difference in payments before and after a cash out refi are minimal. Not only does this speak to the low interest rates we're seeing, but it also speaks to people not refinancing and harvesting the equity from their home and going out and doing something careless with their money. So the biggest question right now is what's ahead? What will the rest of the year look like? Are rates rising? If they are, is that going to affect the price of properties? But in my opinion, they're still at a historic low. The most recent updated home price forecast from the 7 forecasters that I watch are forecasting an average 9% appreciation. We started off the year at about 5% appreciation, and we've risen slowly each month since then. I suspect the prices in the city will not fall. Maybe we'll see them just kind of level off, and maybe they'll sit a little bit longer, but I don't see them falling. So take a look at this slide. Optimists expect 46.5% appreciation by 2026. Pessimists, 10% appreciation. All the panelists, 26% appreciation by 2026. So depending on where you sit, I think even if you're a pessimist in the market, they're calling for appreciation here between now and 2026. And again, I think a lot of people say I'm going to sit on the sidelines and I'm going to wait for prices to drop. And these forecasters are saying it's just not going to happen. So if you're still on the sidelines on renting versus buying, I would say just don't wait. So let's talk affordability. And here we go. New data shows that 84% of Americans plan to cut back spending as a result of price spikes. We're feeling the effects of the inflation, especially in gas prices and groceries. I find that with prices rising and mortgage rates rising, it's really making people have questions about affordability and what they can spend. Well, when we talk about rates right now, we've certainly seen rates in the first 4 months of this year rise dramatically. We started the year about 3.1%. Right now, we're just over 5.25%. And it's expected that the 30-year fixed mortgage rates will likely peak about 5.5 to 5.7%. There is some vulnerability in relationships, so we might see rates as high as low sixes. This is all dependent on inflation and the Fed's funding rates, but I don't expect rates to move much higher than the current rate, or maybe 6% is possible. So inflation is the enemy of a long-term high interest rate. The Fed's action is to tame inflation, so we're going to watch this, and I suspect we're not going to see these rates forever. Prices are rising all around us, and it's impacting what we can spend on a day-to-day basis. Now, for someone who's thinking about buying a home, that's a real concern, and it brings affordability into a question. So let's take a moment to review the slides to see changes in mortgage payments. It goes back to January of 2021. This is based on a loan amount of $300,000. But if you look in January 2021, mortgage rates were a historic low. A typical mortgage payment was about $1,200, a little north of that. Fast forward to where we are today in this rising mortgage rate environment, and things are different. With an interest rate of 5.5%, a mortgage payment jumps up to around $700 or $1,700. That's a $500 per month difference on a $300,000 purchase. Therefore, buyers are feeling the inflation pressure, and unfortunately, especially the first-time home buyers. What we can see right now is that affordability is really approaching more historical levels. This slide shows the Housing Affordability Index. It goes all the way back to 1990. The higher the bar, the more affordable homes are. If you look at where we are over on the right today at 135.4, that's the index that NAR is measuring here. Homes are not as affordable as they were over the past 10 or 12 years, and certainly not as affordable as they were in those orange bars, which was the housing crisis. That's when distressed properties dominated the market. Homes are being sold at a massive discount. We're certainly not there, but we, might see a little bit of rise due to the mortgage rate rise. Homes are not as affordable as they were, even over the past couple of years. It's important to remember that affordability is really a measure of three key things. We mentioned the prices and mortgage rates, but it's also wages. Right now, all three of those things are ticking up historically. Over the past couple of years, mortgage rates have given an offset some of these rising prices. Well, at 5.5%, we're not sitting in that seat anymore, so people are feeling affordability challenges. Now, the context that we love to add here is if you go all the way back to 1990, what we can see is that homes are more affordable than any time leading up to the housing crisis. So I think that context is really key as we've had this conversation. When people say homes aren't affordable anymore, we have to say, compared to when? Now, I wanted to continue on and share this quote from NAR because I think this is also painting a picture of what's really happening in the world around us. It says, the average consumer is spending an additional $429 monthly for items other than shelter. Meanwhile, the average weekly wages rose just $212 per month. So the consumer is short by $270 a month. So that's all those direct results in inflation and the things that we are seeing around us and how it's just simply costs more right now. So this means the average consumer will be looking for a home that is $41,000 cheaper. So the average consumer that's looking to buy a home is reducing their price point. That's very real. That is exactly what these dollars and cents are saying. Consumers are going to need to make a decision. They're either going to jump in and they're going to say, yes, I want to get ahead of this. I want to get ahead of rising rates and rising prices. Or they're going to say, you know what? This isn't right for me. That said, with rental prices on the rise big time, it might not be as hard as we think to make such a decision. And this is the average days on market. I have seen some of the properties stay on the market just a little bit longer. I think that is because we do have a lot of buyers that are on the fence and they're still trying to figure out what they want to do and where they're going to go. But that being said, there's also a few extra homes on the market to look at too. And here's the existing home sales. So the overall takeaway is that the buyer demand is still strong. This will not impact the overall demand that we're seeing right now. So many buyers in the market and so few homes for sale, changing needs, buyer demand is very, very real. So yes, it will put pressure on that lower price point buyer, but overall demand is still really strong. At this time, it is important for a consumer to forget about the rising rates and the rising prices and really think about that long-term net worth development, the net worth growth, and the financial future of buying a home. And I hope you found this enjoyable. It's my very first one, so it's not perfect, but if you learned something, I'm happy. Bye.